Hello, everybody. I'm Mark Siegel from First Second Books, and I'm very proud to be here with some friends, our fellow panelists and creators who are currently working or have been working on a new line of books called World Citizen Comics. And this is a bold new program that we've launched. And these are the first 4 titles you see on your screen. UNRIG, Fault Lines in the Constitution, singular, and then Reconstitutions, plural, and then What Unites Us. They're the first 4 of at least 12, most likely more titles. And they are essentially a bookshelf that is a civics education. Now that could sound pretty dry and boring. It's not. These are designed to be fun, and we're going to get into how that happens. And who's here with me today is the team that brought you UNRIG, How to Fix Our Broken Democracy. That's Dan Newman and George O'Connor. And Dan is the founder of MapLight, which is a very highly esteemed and acclaimed journalistic outfit that's been tracking dark money for a long time, and is the author of UNRIG. And George is the creator, writer, and artist on the monumental Olympian series. And he actually held off, he took a pause before doing the final installment, the 12th and final book in the Olympian series, to do his civic duty and to help save democracy, and to join Dan as the artist in this book. We'll come back to it. And we also have here Cynthia Levinson, who is the author with her husband, Sanford Levinson, of Fault Lines in the Constitution. And that was originally, when I was first toying with the idea of this civics line of graphic novels, I was sitting in DC at a dinner with some librarians, and somebody said to me, leaned over and said, "Please tell me you've read Fault Lines in the Constitution." And this was the original version of this book is a prose book from Algonquin Books. It's still around, very much alive, and being updated every few months with the latest outrageous developments. And the thought was, now the book itself is very entertaining, but it felt like we could do something with a graphic adaptation that would companion the prose book in, revealing ways. And you can see here, you frequently go into these flashbacks, like meanwhile back in 1787, and so we play that to the hilt in this. So Cynthia is here. The artist, I should mention, is Ali Schwed, who does this superb job of adapting this, and who really herself is passionate about the subject matter. And the idea here is, by the time you've read this book, you are essentially a constitutional scholar, whether you saw it happen or not. And I feel like it delivers on that and more because of the conversations it opens up. But we'll come back to that. And then here, okay, we have, this is actually, I believe, the very first exclusive preview of a very recently signed up title in our World Citizen Comics line. This one is called Born in the USA. It's written by Lawrence Goldstone, and this one drills into the 14th and the 15th Amendments and issues of citizenship. It's very timely. It's I found a very potent exploration and opening up of this. So it actually puts it in a context that I know I didn't have for many of the issues that it opens up. And the artist here, and you're seeing these pages for the first time, I think publicly, this is James Otis Smith, who is a new member of the First Second family. And you can actually see James's beautiful work on Gang of Fools, and recently from Abrams, there was Showtime at the Apollo, written by Ted Fox, which I found astonishing. I thought the work was really, really stunning and full of feeling. And you can see here, this is really a first take on one of the opening scenes of this new book, Born in the USA. So welcome. And oh, here we go. Showtime at the Apollo, the epic tale of Harlem's legendary theater. And this is well worth ordering or curbside pickup or whatever you can get, however you can get your hands on it. It's extraordinary work. So I have here some very impressive, inspiring people. I'm thrilled to be here in conversation together at a time where this project is sorely needed. I mean, the whole line, and then these titles in particular. And before we actually just get into our conversation together, I want to thank Metaverse and ReedPop specifically for giving us this opportunity. It feels like we all have I think a strong sense of mission going into these books, and it feels really important to be able to share this at this time. And thanks for you, the four of you, joining me today. It's great to be able to talk. And I know Dan and George, you've been like in full marketing mode. Cynthia, you're definitely getting underway since Fault Lines is going to be coming out shortly. And I think, you know, right now is an opportunity for us to meet. And here we are. The pandemic is unfolding and affecting pretty much most humans on this planet. And the idea behind the World Citizen Comics line was that we are in some ways reaping the consequences of not having a civics education, in a sense. And now the World Citizen line is not so much about trying to recapture the good old days, because they're kind of hard to find if you go looking. It's more about the future. And with every passing day, I think there is this sense growing on many of us that we're not actually going back to the old normal. It's probably gone, and it probably had to go. But now it's the unknown, you know, and many forces are vying for control of that future. And, you know, and I think without getting moralistic, I think bad things prey on ignorance. So anything that fights ignorance is likely to be on the right side of history. And I think this is our mission here. Now, with World Citizen, the intention is to not make civics dry and boring. And actually, I'd like to start the conversation with Dan, if that's okay, but specifically about, there's a very curious thing you reveal in UNRIG about the purpose of making policy and politics boring and unattractive. Do you want to talk about that a little, Dan?
Thanks, Mark. So right in the opening chapter, I talk about these words that are really boring: redistricting and voter registration and electoral college. Like, they're very dry and technical. But the thing is, as I talk about in UNRIG, these rules about how our democracy works are foundational to so much of what we experience. And here we are, all stuck in our homes like the rest of the world in this pandemic. And our government's terrible response is directly a result of the forces that have rigged these rules to benefit the wealthy, to stop government from working.
And what's the place of making things like unappealing and boring?
So there's this, I've been working on improving our democracy for 20 years, trying to pass laws, support activists to do that. And there's this misconception that how our democracy works is just too complicated to understand. But I know that's not true. And so working with George's amazing art, we're able to tell the story of like, how do people get elected? What are the rules about money in politics? What is gerrymandering? How do you actually stop it? And who are the people that are bringing this about and actually changing the country right now? So by putting it in the comics format, it takes it out of the realm of boredom and makes a light bulb go on for people and say, hey, this is actually not so complicated. And this 18-year-old college student and these grandmothers in North Dakota are all changing the system in a positive way, and I can do it too.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in because
Yeah,
working with Dan on this, we've done a few appearances together now. And one of the things I've always asked him, and I thought was so fascinating, is like, why do a book like UNRIG? This isn't an adaptation of a previous book. This was, he envisioned it as a graphic novel. And it was that idea that you could get like that kind of info across so much more easier this way. It kind of, a graphic novel, having that visual component, it kind of like invites in a reader in a way that like a wall of text might make them bounce off. But if you open up a copy, you know, a page of UNRIG, and there's like, you know, a little state of California arguing with the state of New York, or there's like, you know, little cartoon characters of the founding fathers, whatever, that becomes a much softer image and an easier thing for people to digest.
Yeah.
So it's really great to see that comics have kind of stepped up to the plate finally, where, you know, it's the synthesis of words and pictures coming together to tell this story, or in this instance, to tell something that would otherwise be potentially viewed as boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I should add to that. There's a lot of important, great books about democracy that are very dense and depressing to read. And I have many on my shelf. And I know many people have them on their shelves unread, and I'm in the same position for some of them myself. And it just goes one after the other, like all the problems in intricate detail, but it doesn't tell you how to fix them, and it doesn't tell you how to get into this mess. And so, as George said, I conceived this as a graphic novel because I didn't want to write another book that, frankly, might just sit on the shelf for people. Like, this is something you just start turning the first pages, and you're involved, and you see the stories, and you see the characters, and it brings you inspiration and optimism too, which we all need right now.
And you were very careful to bring in the hopeful elements. Like Dan mentioned, so many books just kind of are a litany of everything that's gone wrong and all the evils. And Dan is very careful in the way he constructed the text of UNRIG to show at least an instance, maybe a very small instance, where despite these giant powers arrayed against them, people on at least a local level have done something to unrig that system. And when I was first brought onto the project, that was one of the reasons that I decided to do this, because I don't think I have it in me. I don't have the level of emotional well-being to do hundreds of pages of just doom and gloom. I needed to see that there was at least some small speck of light at the end of the table.
It's a very long table. It's the table that stretches into 2021.
I've literally been measuring furniture all day, so I have furniture on my brain.
You're going to start drawing IKEA manuals. Yeah. Well, I think it's great. I mean, the thing is, for us who love comics, you know, we've long known that the medium is incredible for nonfiction, you know, and there's a lot of memoir. Now there's more and more just really good nonfiction. And I think the godfather of the nonfiction comic has to be Scott McCloud, you know, who can unpack like the Google Chrome operating system and make it interesting, you know. So if he can do that, then we should be able to explain gerrymandering in a way that comes alive.
Scott McCloud's avatar too was definitely the direct antecedent to my Dan Newman avatar.
And yeah. That's right. And I like that you're staying on brand, Dan, and wearing.
Thanks. Yes, my character in the book has a blue check shirt, and I do the same.
Good.
Fun fact, Dan is actually shirtless. That's just a full body tattoo. It says plaid tattoo.
Good. All right. We've got some good reveal here. So Cynthia, you seem to be having a blast with this new graphic novel experience.
Oh, we are. Yes, a lot. In fact, I just got off a Zoom call with a group of civics teachers, educators in Illinois, who cannot wait for the graphic version of Fault Lines in the Constitution. I should just make one amendment, though. The text version of the book came out from Peachtree Publishers.
Oh, I said something else. Yes, Peachtree.
Yeah. But yeah, we already have.
Yeah, yes, that's Dan. That's the Dan Rather book. Is from Algonquin. It's Peach. Yeah, my
yeah.
apologies.
But yeah, we're really excited about it. We already have some interviews lined up, even though the book isn't coming out until third week of September. Yeah, and we're hoping to, be on some national teacher conferences too, which will be on, some form of Zoom. So yeah, we are having a great time with it. One of the characters, the whole, the book is true like Dan's, but one of the characters in the book that Ali Schwed drew just perfectly is a young woman named Lysia Dalla, who is a dreamer who, spoiler alert, just got her green card. We're thrilled for her. And so she's in a chapter about how filibusters can undo our democratic process. Anyway, I sent her a copy of the advanced reader copy, and she's ecstatic, and everybody in her family wants it, and I think she's going to be handing it out, or maybe I hope selling it out on street corners. So yeah, we're having a great time with it.
Yeah, I mean, that is also part of the underlying intention here is, these books should be helping to form the leaders of tomorrow. There's like young people these books are intended to arm them, and equip them with, a deep understanding of what a citizen can be and do.
Yeah, and piggybacking on what Dan and George talked about, this book too, it has worrisome stories, I guess, such as Lysia's, why haven't we resolved the immigration problem yet? And we have a chapter on epidemics, going back to what you were saying at the opening, Mark, in regard to the pandemic. But we also, like Dan, have hopeful outcomes. We finish off every story that we begin, and we give readers things they can do, ways to change our Constitution to resolve some problems, ways that states and also other countries have different kinds of governmental systems, democratic ones, that can prevent or head off some of the problems that we're facing. So there's also notes of hope in Fault Lines also.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, on just a bit of a personal note at the moment. I felt there was, it's obviously been very turbulent times for all of us, and the turbulence is not going to go away this fall. It looks like it's probably going to get more crazy, and but I felt like something happened when the Black Lives Matter protests began, and it was like right around that time I felt like there was suddenly, the potential for very bad outcomes is still there.
Yeah.
But it felt like there was something else suddenly, like the potential for some very good outcomes suddenly coming into view. So it's been a weird ride with the setting up this line, because at first I felt like it was almost a selfish need for myself to start something to just channel the rage and the outrage and the disgust at, how things were turning out over and over and over. And it did have that effect. Like I felt like I could stop just like, ranting on Facebook and doing other useless things like that and start putting something else or help champion something into the world. But then I feel as the months wear on, I'm much more turned to the future. And I think of these books as these are going to be the toolkits for, it's more than recovery. It's for like it's a reinvention of democracy. And it's not just America. I think we're very much in the same boat now as a human race. And I love the fact that in Fault Lines, obviously it's centered on the US Constitution, but there's this awareness which leads very much to our other constitutional book that's coming, where you mention Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you know, when she was asked, you know, what's the best constitution out there? And she's like, oh, don't bother with the American one. Start with South Africa.
Exactly.
And of course, she was pilloried on Fox for that. But she, you know, I've heard that now from several different constitutional scholars. That it's like, it's a much more advanced constitution.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating.
Yeah. One of the civics teachers I was talking with a little bit earlier said Germany. He really likes the German system because it's a combination. And, you know, we bring up advantages of a thoroughly parliamentary system too. I mean, you know, really, if you're going to change things, you can think about some pretty extensive changes in our system. As, you know, as thought projects, as engaging people in discussion, writing, who knows, maybe doing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a fascinating time. I think that, you know, we're seeing, I mean, for a while I felt like every email, every piece of mail in my mailbox had the word unprecedented on it. And it was just like, it was like, okay, guys, somebody think of some other words here. But we're in a time that, like, we can't really point to anything else in our living memory that's like this. And so in so many ways, you know, the old things that seemed immovable and unchangeable are suddenly shaken loose. And it's possible to envision things differently. And there'll be another book coming down the road from Becca Feathers as well, as called Why the People, where she's selling the idea of democracy, essentially, and not taking it for granted that, you know, we think that's the best system. But the way she comes at it is almost like a menu of all possible forms of government. And it's like, okay, well, why not? You know, let's look at, like, what about an oligarchy? What about a plutocracy? What about, you know, full-on totalitarian regime? Like, why not? You know, I mean, some people are actually saying those things. You know, they're like, as long as it's our guy, you know, and so she looks at them. She looks at them one by one, by one, by one. And what's interesting is, to the point you were just making, Cynthia, is she looks at all these different forms of democracy. There's not just one model.
Right.
And it's really quite enlightening. It's really. So James, I definitely don't want to leave you out here. So you basically are the latest to join this list with this project. And what I love about the sample we were showing earlier, those 2 pages, is what the feel of your artwork and that sample gets us into. It's a very human story, you know, and it's very right now human. It's not so much about starting from the conceptual and from, you know, the amendments. It's really like feet on the ground, family life being affected. And I'm curious to know what it was like for you, you know, when we first reached out and we were like, hey, we got this script, you know, are you interested? And like, what was that like when you got that proposal?
Well, it's incredibly flattering, so thank you very much. And but also, so it's 2 things at once. One, it's intimidating because it's a very large nonfiction book, and just the idea of just drawing that. But the other thing was that it's exciting because one of the reasons I like doing nonfiction sometimes is that I get to learn at the same time. So it's kind of an excuse, especially at this point. It's hard to read when I have a lot of work to do. So the fact that I can read as I'm working is great. And I always remember, I had a professor in college. I went to liberal arts college. I graduated without being able to do anything. But I had this one teacher who made economics interesting. And it's what made me realize that it's not the subject, it's the way you are taught it. And that you can learn anything, right? With a few exceptions. But our political system, you can learn it. has to be given to you in a understandable way. And I do think that that certain people do have a vested interest in making this stuff unclear.
Yeah.
The same thing with our economic system. Some people do benefit from everyone else thinking that you just can't get it. So I think I love the idea of presenting this to people in a way that's just very clear and direct, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. It's like, you know, those, you remember the old Larry Gonick
Yeah.
cartoon guide to the universe? There was cartoon guide to economics, cartoon guide to statistics, cartoon guide to sex, it was like, and I remember somebody came up to me with like, do you know which one sold the most? And I was like, well, yeah, probably sex. And he's like, no, statistics.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what? But the thing is, you know, who knows exactly why, but the likely explanation is a lot of people have to learn about statistics.
Yeah.
And like, if you're gonna have to learn about statistics and on that bookshelf is a comic book,
Right.
what are you gonna pick up? You know, I would really not wanna, you know, and so there's something to be said about, you know, and I think the other piece to what you were saying is that teacher of yours probably brought some passion. You know,
Exactly.
I see that with my own kids and the teachers that really spark for them. You know, my daughter just went, because of her science teacher, she went and started pollinator gardens, you know, to save the bees. And she's like getting permission from the town to go start these little garden beds. And, you know, and I'm like, wow, that teacher, he like passed the fire of something to her, you know. And there's these amazing teachers. I think we all have them in our life, you know, like one or two, maybe. It's like sometimes it's like a lifelong passion is born in that classroom, you know. So who knows? I mean, who knows who's going to be, you know, the leaders of tomorrow that are like, this is going to be part of their bedrock, you know, and their passion getting born, you know.
Yeah, everybody I think has got that one. I'm sorry, Cynthia, but yeah, everyone's got that one teacher. And what I'm excited about this line of books too is just hopefully it's not just people will be able to learn how our system works, but we'll be able to get ideas about where they can take it.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's the hope. I mean, for us, in a way, it's a signal, you know, it was the luck of the draw that UNRIG was the first one ready. But I love the fact that we start with UNRIG, you know, it's like throwing a brick in the pond, you know, it's like, it's going to make ripples, and it's like, and it's challenging where we've landed up, you know, as opposed to like, you know, learn the system and keep it going the way it's been going. Absolutely. It's great. It's great. There's such a level of passion in the creators in all these. It's really remarkable.
I was going to say that James's sounds sort of like maybe the Vulgate version of American government. You know, like the Vulgate Bible was sort of the Bible for the people, the masses could finally.
Right, it wasn't in Latin, that unreadable to everybody.
Yeah, right. And that caused huge change around the globe.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting example, because it's like the idea that it's like, you know, it's beyond you, you know, leave it to us.
Yeah.
Right.
Has kept, you know.
Pat.
Yeah. Yeah, those days are over, I think.
Yeah, one of the things that drove me crazy about the impeachment, and we don't need to get into the specifics or anything, but the press kept saying that the details behind the impeachment were too complicated. Didn't make any sense. Whether you agree with it or not, it seemed pretty clear, but everyone just kept pushing the narrative that like this is just way beyond you. Right. So yeah, I hope for just more of people, even deciding if you think it's beyond you, ask, well, why should it be beyond me?
Yeah, good question.
And I love the idea that it's like there's a baseline of understanding that's like, okay, so not everybody is going to make politics their central passion, you know, and I think we shouldn't. I mean, that's not, you know, who was it? Was it John Adams who said, I study war so my son can study business so his son can study art? Yeah. You know, and there's this idea, I think that was John Adams.
Let's hope so. It's a good line.
It's a good line. But you know, there's the idea of like the purpose of, you have your civics life, and for some people that is more a central pursuit for them. And for others, you know, it's not their central pursuit, but still the idea that like one piece of our time is a bit of a duty to make sure like that the next generation gets a better, more perfect union, you know, and we in some way help kind of move things, you know, towards better. So I think these are, and to me, these books are also for not just the policy wonks, right? It's like, it's going to be for all kinds of people. And some of them will get really drawn into, there's going to be one on dictatorship, you know, by Sarah Kendzior and Andrea Chalupa, who do the Gaslit Nation podcast, and it's called Dictatorship. It's easier than you think. And it's like, it unpacks the authoritarian playbook in a very funny, very smart way. And that, you know, you don't have to be into daily politics to really find that fascinating. I think it's going to be true for many of these books.
James mentioned, you know, what you were able to learn while you're working on the book, and I feel the same way. Mark, you just mentioned a more perfect union. I have to say that phrase for decades really made no sense to me. If it's perfect, how can it be more perfect?
Right.
It was really talking with my husband. My co-author is a constitutional scholar, but it was in fact talking with a friend of ours, another constitutional historian actually, who said, think of perfect as a verb, not as an adjective. To perfect.
Oh.
And then, you know, that kind of encapsulated it for me. Oh, okay, we can perfect what we have. And
yeah, it's also part of that. It involves looking. It involves actually seeing things as they really are.
Yeah.
And which means it's, you know, there's America the beautiful and the ideals of America, and then there's America the terrible and the horrific. And, you know, if we're not honest to begin with, you know, so I think there's a nice mix throughout these books of some very idealistic and also some nuts and bolts and everyday reality. But yeah, so I'm curious. So Dan, you've got now a taste of actually getting this book out, right? And you're connected to a lot of policymakers, a lot of authors and political writers and journalists, because I think MapLight is a resource for many of these people. So what's it been like for you?
It's been really exciting that what George and I worked on for 2 years is now out there for people to read. And I think, so I can see this as an entry point that people can learn what are all the problems of democracy and how to fix it, and in a way that like you don't see in the news media and other books. And it has been that entry point, and I've gotten feedback on that. But one of the things that's been surprising for me, even people pretty well steeped in democracy issues have read this and says, well, I haven't really thought about this in the same way. And, you know, and to put all these issues together in an integrated package of how the wealthiest institutions and people in our society are trying to bias the rules. I think the other part that really makes an impression on people is a section of the book called The Wealth Hoarders, which is about the network started by Charles and David Koch that numbers just a few hundred families who are trying to tilt the whole country toward their own interests, so it's unresponsive to what people want. And that's very much informed by Jane Mayer's book, Dark Money, Nancy MacLean's book, Democracy in Chains. These books are both like amazing and thick nonfiction books, history and journalism. And so in 50 comics pages, George and I have laid this out in a way that if you're wondering like what the hell is going on in this country, like why are things so chaotic, why are things so difficult, that it really gets at the root and shows you, well, who's actually making them difficult.
And it does it very graphically. I remember, George, going through while you were working on that, it was like a harrowing kind of gauntlet for you. You're like, I don't know how much more I can do of this stuff.
Yeah, to circle back to what I said earlier, how there's always the positivity. Dan, I feel like you were a little bit more hard pressed to find the positivity because the forces that the Koch brothers and others like them have, rallied behind them are so daunting. And it's just that was a tough chunk. I feel like in many ways it's the signature chapter of UNRIG. I know it's available to read as an excerpt in several locations. And if you haven't seen UNRIG, I'd say go find that one because a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in there. Actually, James, fun fact, James and I are actually, we're really good friends. We live only a few blocks apart from each other. Were you in the studio during any of the parts when I was working on that?
Yeah, I saw you pulling your hair out. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like, there's one panel in UNRIG, see if you can find it, of a person just yelling nihilism. It's a little bit I threw in myself, and that's very much a self-portrait of me during that part, where it was like just dealing with these huge ideas and just being, it was a gauntlet. I like the way you put that, Mark. It was a real interesting gauntlet to get through.
This is, by the way, if you haven't held one of these in your hands, they're
Do that too.
they're beautiful objects. We've got here's our fault lines, and you can see there's like the
Nice.
You've seen the Hamilton screenplay. They did the 18th century kind of ribs on the spine. Like we're going for that, but also something fun and very appealing. It's obviously a striking cover.
They're beautiful. When do we get our hard copy, Mark?
You should be getting yours quite soon. You'll get your advanced copy. This is the Dan Rather, which is just the case.
It's so thin.
I just received it, but
The colors are smashing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they look amazing. Yeah.
It's probably the most attractive book production I've ever been part of. I also wanted to point out, just because this is a visual medium, I just happened to open up to the page of the guy yelling nihilism.
Oh yeah,
That was me. Nihilism.
thanks for that. That's great. Well, James.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, it is a danger, I think, when you're looking at this kind of stuff of becoming depressed or dejected in some way. And so I think like it's important not just to have the positivity, but also to have the constructive aspect to it as well, that like this is a system, it was made by people, it can be taken apart by people.
Yeah.
People
Our intention certainly was not to depress people, but to fire people up. There are action steps. And, we want people engaged, not retreating and throwing up their hands.
Yeah, as part of the UNRIG, there's a website that we made for the book, unrigbook.com, that you can go in and see places in your state and your town that you can get involved with. So very direct calls to action that what do you do with this? And really the number one answer is find other people who want to fix this problem, find the other groups that already exist that want to fix these problems and get together and make it happen.
Yeah, UNRIG is filled with examples of just a handful of people doing exactly what Dan's talking about and making real change. And I want to say also, like the idea of these books, like they are educational experiences. I don't want to say they're so didactic to say they're just educational books, but like you will learn about whatever the subject matter is. You'll learn a lot. And even if it is something that seems like it's daunting or terrifying or scary or hopeless, you're not going to feel that way afterwards. Like reading that whole section on the wealth hoarders, like it answered so many questions about why things are the way they are. And there are people who are doing things to work against it. And it was in the middle of drawing it felt rough, but at the end of it, it felt like, I'm like, this is a problem that people can work to overcome. Like this is not etched in stone by a power above. This is people, like James said, people doing it and people can take it apart.
Well, and I think I've gotten feedback from people that just find it really empowering to have this clarity. Like so much of what the forces of anti-democracy doing relies on secrecy. If they just went out and it's like, hey, I want to stop democracy, right? No one would pay attention. They get laughed off the table. And so they have this secret agenda about preventing people from voting and preventing, buying favored politicians. And so by exposing the secrecy of that agenda, like George and I really make something that is empowering for people. It's like, oh, now I get it.
I think it's also important to remind people that we have undergone great change in our history. It used to be that the Senate was elected by state legislatures. Well, that's not the case anymore. That was a major change in our governmental system, and that can happen.
Yeah.
We can make this happen again.
Now, clearly, I think we're in a time of enormous change and enormous possibility. And the hope is that this is, like, to what James was saying just before, this is empowering to action. You know, and I think the first step is understanding, and is to, you know, we can't proceed. Basically, ignorance is a barrier to democracy. Like, there's no democracy as long as ignorance is maintained. So, you know, shining a light on all these different aspects from all different angles for all different types of people in different interests as well is the first step. But then it's very much about empowering citizens to shape this country, shape the future. And clearly this is a project for our times, if ever there was one. But yeah, so I think we're out of time. It feels like we're just getting started. It's really lovely hanging out with you today and having this little cup of tea around the kitchen table together. And I think many people will be delighting in your work with this. And you know,
thanks, Mark, for bringing us together and for bringing these books out.
It's my honor to work with people like yourselves.
Well,
Thank
really
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great to be with you.
Take good care. World Citizen Comics. Thanks again to Metaverse and to ReedPop. And be sure to check worldcitizencomics.com.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.